And so back to what we had said about following a process, you may know your process, or I may know my process as a salesperson, but if I don't have any impulse control, I'm going to skip steps. I am going to jump to a potential solution and not really understand what your need is, not really create a relationship with you. And quite honestly, the solution that I present to you probably isn't a fit. And so, those are just two examples, the emotional self-awareness and the impulse control, where we see that, hey, if we can work with individuals and organizations to, first of all, understand where they are at from an emotional intelligence perspective, and then work with them to improve on areas that they can improve, that's where we see results. And it's not just, a kumbaya moment. It's measurable results in revenue growth, in hiring the right people, and keeping the right people.
Mm-hmm.
So did that answer your question?
Right.
I'm not concerned.
Well, I appreciate you going through that, Michael, because I don't think a lot of business owners understand exactly what sales EQ means and how it can help their organizations. And that's something where I realize now I've always had that, I guess. That's always been my sales style. I've never understood how you can sell without first understanding what that customer's needs are. And then it's not up to me to whether we're going to work together. It's whether I can help them.
Right.
And I think that's, yeah, please.
Yeah. Sorry. It's the point of, from an emotional intelligence standpoint, if I can show empathy, which means I truly understand your situation, right? Well, first of all, I have to understand your situation, right? But if I do, we are going to connect better, right? My solutions are going to be better. You're going to look at me as a trusted advisor and not a necessary evil. And again, that, to me, without that, you're just going to keep spinning. You'll have some good months, some bad months. Your company will grow, it'll fall. You'll be dependent on that one big deal, and you won't have that continuous, just that steady, continuous growth or success. Absolutely.
And I think that's why we do so well with small business owners, because we're
Yeah.
small business owners.
Yeah.
Right.
We have congruency, right? We know what it's like. We have been there. We've been through it. We, been through the trenches. And when we work with other business owners, we legitimately have the empathy because we know what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of, not to beat this up too much, but I think it's important. This is an area where if you spend the time to listen to your salespeople's phone calls and, evaluate if they're following the sales EQ process, you will immediately see where they're making mistakes and
Yep.
how they could have done better. I knew I always had that, but when we went through your training, it's like a light bulb went off, or went on, and I finally was able to see things in a different way. And my conversations changed overnight. Right. The teed up approach, I'm thinking about that. That was an incredible improvement.
Right. And from a coaching standpoint, when you listen to those calls and you have a salesperson that isn't asking the right questions, isn't teeing up the meeting up front, meaning setting the agenda, getting buy-in on the agenda, setting the expectation that we're going to come up with some clear next steps or make a decision if we're going to move forward at the end of this call. Now, they may, again, know all of those skills, but without assertiveness, without being assertive enough, they'll go along to get along. They'll let the process fall to the side. So, like we said, like you use that teed up approach, which is how to set up your sales call or your meeting in a way that everyone has a clear understanding of what's going to be covered. Everyone has a clear understanding of what the benefit is to them, and that we are going to take some time to determine if we should move forward or not. That takes assertiveness. That takes self-regard, right? That's emotional intelligence. I can teach anyone the nuts and bolts of that process, but if they don't have enough assertiveness, if they don't have enough self-regard, they will never consistently execute it unless I'm sitting there watching.
Wow.
That is so true.
That is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to change direction a little bit.
Okay.
What would you say in all of your experience and all of the people that you have helped the number one bad habit or sales challenge companies struggle with?
All right. So and I typically work with small and medium-sized businesses.
Okay.
That's my sweet spot. I would say working with business owners, I see two things, and they're completely different extremes. One business owner, what happens is they're incredibly talented. They've got a great idea, a great product, a great service, something that they're bringing to market, right? And they're just getting started, and so they try to do it all. They are the implementer, they're the CEO, and they're the head salesperson. Now that works when you're starting out, but it's not scalable. And so if you have someone that is running the business and then is also the director of sales, for lack of a better title, right? To me, you're pulling yourself in too many directions. A couple of things will happen. What I tend to see is the sales process or sales effort gets pushed aside, either because you've had some success and now you have too much work to sell, right? Or you didn't start the business because you love sales. You started the business because you loved whatever that is you're doing. I think of private practice doctors,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
They're running a business, but that isn't why they became a doctor. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's one. The other piece that I see with small business is that, we say this all the time in the office, everyone's looking to be rescued. So I'm a small business owner. I'm afraid to, I don't want to hire a salesperson per se. I don't want to put the work in to really come up with my strategy, but I know this person and they'll sell for me, or this person has a great book of business. So I'll just bring them in and they'll fill my calendar, or they'll give me a bunch of orders, and you're never going to be rescued. I even see it with, organizations that will hire salespeople from their competitor. And the thinking is, well, they'll bring their book of business with them.
No.
Maybe 10% comes over, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. And so don't look to be rescued. That's one. And secondly, create your culture that you want, create the environment that you want, so that you can bring additional people in there to drive your strategy. So those are my two.
That's awesome. And now you've worked with hundreds of employees. I'm curious what you feel is the most important quality in a salesperson.
Most important quality in a salesperson. That is a great question. When I tie it back to emotional intelligence, the three that I'm really looking for, and that's in interviews, or if I have the opportunity to put them through an assessment. One is empathy, because I think you just have to have that. You have to have that there. Second, I would say flexibility. Okay. I think that sales, no matter how much process you put in place, because of the importance of soft skills, it's not black and white. You do have to be comfortable living in the gray. Mm-hmm. And so there's that flexibility. I'd probably put creativity with that too. And so I would look for that as well. And then I would also say resiliency. I'd look for, you've got to be resilient. And have that understanding of, and I do a lot of coaching, the difference between the roles that we play and the people that we are. So a lot of times salespeople, if they get those intermixed, when they get rejected, when they hear that no, they take it personally.
Yes.
And the salespeople that realize you are not being, they are not rejecting you. They're rejecting the role that you play. So how can you be better at your role?
Yeah.
Game changer. Absolute game changer. Resilience.
Be Teflon. You have to be Teflon.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting. That took me back again to the head trash.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We talked about that. There's so much head trash that a salesperson brings forward from previous experiences or personal head trash.
Yep.
How often do you see that? Yeah.
All the time. I mean, and I had to go through that too. Young salesperson, they're not going to take me seriously. My customers aren't buying. All of my customers are too cheap. All of that sales, all of that head trash. And then what you do is you look for ways to validate what your that head trash is, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like when I was a young sales manager, I had a sales professional that worked for me, and I was convinced that he was always late to meetings. And this is a small little example, right? And he said, always late to meetings, he's always late to meetings. Well, over 10 meetings, he could show up on time 8 or 9 times. But on that 10th one, if he was late, see, he's always late to meetings, right? So you're always looking to validate your head trash. And so one of the things that we need to do is change your self-talk, change what you're telling yourself. The nice thing is subconscious can't discern fact from fiction. So if I tell myself, kind of go Stuart Smalley here, I'm good enough, smart enough, gosh darn it, people like me, eventually I'll start believing it, and that will change my actions. That will change my behavior. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah. You know, I heard that organically, you hear 4 negative things to yourself and to 1 positive.
Wow.
Yep.
Isn't that crazy?
That is.
Yep. That is spot on. It's the stat I've heard. The percentage is 77%, which is exactly what. Yep.
Wow.
77% is negative.
So you have to work really hard
Yeah.
to replace that negative thought with a positive one. Like, it's work. It doesn't just organically happen.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, magic, you're a positive person and you're successful.
Right.
It has to be repetitive, right?
Well, and some people have chemicals, that don't allow them to be a positive person.
Yeah.
So you're overcoming that. Yeah.
Yep.
So Michael, I want to move into, what does it look like when you go into an organization and you're starting the process with them? Like, how do you start that process? What's some of the first steps? Yeah.
Yeah. Great question. Because we realize that, it's the old saying, if the only solution you have is a hammer, every problem becomes a nail, right? And so we want to avoid that. And so really, when we go in, the first thing that we need to do is we've got to run our process too. And so first of all, we've got to get a really clear understanding of where the organization is at. And that is from a strategy standpoint, that's from a management or behavior, management or structure standpoint, and then also an execution standpoint. And again, I'm primarily talking from a sales focus here. So we want to take a look at those things. And many times what we'll see is, hey, we've got a pretty good strategy and we like our structure, we like our management, but we're not getting the behaviors, the sales behaviors, the activity. Okay, so if that's the case, we've really got to take a look at, go back up to, do we have the right structure in place? Many times I'll work with an organization and they want a team-based culture and everybody's helping each other out. But then I look at their sales structure and it's siloed and it's designed to have all your salespeople compete against each other. And it's designed that if, that you're rewarded for stealing opportunities and closing them on your own. And so we've got to go through all of that first. And then second, and it's going to sound like I'm kind of walking through the flowers here, but then we've got to get really clear on what success looks like from a revenue standpoint, from a market share standpoint, profitability, culture, those different things. But it has to be observable, identifiable, measurable. And if we can really figure that out, then we can say, okay, do we have the right strategy in place? What needs to change? Do we have the right management or structure in place? What needs to change? And then we can take a look at the behaviors that our sales team needs or our entire sales culture, how they need to perform, how we're going to measure it, how we're going to hire those people in. Once we do that, then we can say, all right, then from a behavior standpoint, what skills do we need to develop with the leadership? How are they going to support that? Training is a process, not an event. It's a culture thing, and that's the only way it's ever successful. So probably a long answer to a short question there, but that's kind of the
it's an important question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I found, working with salespeople on my own teams and for companies that I work with over the years, that I find some salespeople are not self-motivated. Like, I was very driven. Like, I saw a quota, I had to hit it. I was like, had to do it. It was just inside of me that I had to make my quota. I had to be number one on the top of the wheel. I had to win the trip. Where does that come in? As a sales manager, how do you get people focused to be, assertive and going after goals like that?
Yeah, great question. And there isn't just one answer. There's a number of things to look at. One, going back to emotional intelligence, and this is why I recommend any sales team or professional, whether the company does or an individual does it, to go through an emotional intelligence assessment to find out where you're at. The great thing about emotional intelligence is you can improve it, right? And so first of all, you look for salespeople that have that assertiveness. Now, again, too much assertiveness, that can show up, that can be a problem too. But from that, we want to coach assertiveness, because that could be one of the issues. Second one, and again, still going kind of in the assessment world, if you look at different values, people are motivated by different things, right? And so we need to understand what type of motivator, or what type of motivators we need in place in our culture. I'll give you an example. So if someone, Susan, I would assume that if I put you through a values assessment, utilitarianism or return on investment or reward for your work would show up pretty strong. Is that pretty safe to say? Yeah, I know. I went on a limb there, right? And so, and that is something that's pretty important in a sales professional to be successful. Had a salesperson that was really low, wasn't motivated by money, wasn't motivated by that. She was motivated. She had more of a social value. She wanted to do more, with the greater good in her community. And so again, I wouldn't hire for that, but I had this really great salesperson. I had to tap into what motivated her. And so as opposed to trying to throw more financial incentives toward her, I said, hey, look, if we can hit some of these sales goals, I'll give you a couple of days off to work with Habitat for Humanity and go build a house. If we hit another sales goal, the sales team will join you. And
that's a big one.
Yeah, and so again, I'm not saying that we want to have these different structures for every individual, but back to your specific question, we look for assertiveness. We look for someone that values that utilitarian value as far as those typical sales rewards. And then also, if you look from like a behavioral style, someone that that high driver personality, kind of helps. But the next level is someone that we want to make sure they understand how to identify an individual style, communication style, and adapt to that. And so that's kind of the 3 points of that triangle that I look for or focus on.
That's great. Really helpful information there. And I love the idea of what I heard you say is tailoring the reward towards the salesperson's personality, what motivates them, because I think that's a mistake a lot of companies make is they throw money at the situation. Not everyone is motivated 100% by just additional money. I mean, we all want to make money, but I'm geared that way. I'm a person that I need to have a purpose in what I'm doing to be 100% into it.
Right.
And so,
right,
And so what's one of the best ways to be able to analyze, what is that motivator for the salesperson?
Yeah, so in coaching and not using formal assessments, one of the things that I encourage people to spend time with when they're talking to their sales folks or even thinking themselves, ask your people what they do when they're not getting paid. Where do they spend their time?
That's a good idea. That's a really great idea.
So what are some of their passions, right? So, with me, so I'm definitely a utilitarian. I like return on investment, that kind of stuff, and probably that's what attracted me to sales. And I do have a high aesthetic motivator, meaning I really like the surroundings around me, and I like being out in my garden, in my yard, and I've got a forest in the back, and all those kind of things. But that can really kind of tee into what motivates people. My wife is heavily involved in retriever rescue of Colorado, and so she's got that social thing, and so that's something that you can say, oh, okay, well, that's something that motivates, that fulfills this person.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about finances, we all need our needs met, right? Of
Yes.
course, but it's okay. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I think we talked about the teed up approach.
Yeah.
So, we did talk about the teed up approach a little bit at the beginning of this, but let's go back. What comes to mind is there's so many different approaches that we've learned working with you. And I guess the easiest question to ask is, what do you feel is the most important sales approach that a small business company can work on? Where do they start?
Yeah, great question. And where I would start is right at the beginning, and that is how you tell someone what you do, what your company does. Okay. And so, let me give you an example. So I worked in healthcare for about 10 years and I ran a medical billing company. And so there's a lot of medical billing companies out there. There's a very low cost of entry to get into that industry, but we were one of the bigger ones. And so, people would ask, private practice docs would ask us, okay, what do you do? Tell me about your company. And typically what individuals would say, and what this company said before I joined them was, hey, we are the largest privately held billing company in Colorado. We have 50 employees. We support 39 specialties, and all of that's great information, but it sounds exactly like the competition, right? It's all just this features commodity language, right? And so where we worked as we were creating that culture was, all right, let's get really clear on the problems that we solve and the opportunities that we can create for our ideal customer, and get really clear on that, and then communicate that in a way that we can paint that picture. So when I'm talking to that private practice doc, he has a clear understanding of what we do. And so just to kind of play it out here, where we went to, so I'd be at a networking event, I'd be talking to physicians, and they'd say, okay, well, tell me about your company. Well, typically private practice physicians like yourself will come to us because they're frustrated, they're working longer hours, they're making less money, and they're concerned because with all the new government regulations, they're concerned that they won't get paid at all. Yeah. Not sure if you're experiencing that, right? And so, that's just one example, but that delivering your value proposition in a way that connects emotionally and sets you apart from your competition, that is key. That's where you start. And that should go from the CEO to the sales team to the part-time person that is a college intern. Everyone should know those value propositions, and that's how you communicate what you do.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, Michael, as an advisor to private business owners, what's the biggest mistake you see business owners make when they're growing their company?
Ooh, biggest mistake. I would say, I think it goes back to something we talked a little bit about earlier, but a little different twist to it. It's not trusting others, not valuing outside counsel, not letting that process run. Let that, because, and I get it, right? And you both know this. It's like, hey, we've got to make payroll, man. We got to pay the lights. We got to do those things. And processes take time, and you have to trust that process. Now, trust but verify, but it's hey, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Now let's try this. Okay, no, that didn't work. So now we're going to do this. Come up with your strategy, manage your strategy, horizon plan this thing, right? Just plan out as far as you can see and continue to adjust. That's what I see where people fall short, or individuals or small businesses fall short.
I love that. So I'm going to continue and ask you, with so many experiences that you've had working with small business owners, what would be your recommendation to them when they hit that first challenge or that first plateau, where maybe they're even questioning, why did I start doing this?
Yeah.
All
right. We all look at each other.
I know, because we've been there, right?
Baking pies. We're in the baking pies. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's great, because I think I went through that when the pandemic hit, for sure. Why did I do this? I think it just goes back to, breathing a little bit, slowing down. Why are you feeling those emotions? First of all, getting really clear on what is the trigger that is fueling that first of all, and then also to take some time to remind yourself why you did it in the first place and what you enjoy about it. And so, what you're passionate about. And I'm not one of those people that says, hey, find your passion and you'll never work a day in your life again. I don't believe that. I believe that. Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah. And when I look at from my perspective as a small business owner, what I love about is the freedom that I have, the choice that I have, that if I want to work 16 hours a day, or if I need to, I can. So I think it's just taking a step back and reminding yourself why you did it, looking at your self-talk, making sure you're telling yourself that yes, you are very good at what you do,
Yep.
and there is a reason that you're here. There is a benefit to what you do, and that's probably not a great answer, but I think that's where it starts.
I think that's a fabulous answer, because I'm telling you, we all have been there. We're going through it now. We're going to go through it in the future. It's part of being a small business owner. It's not easy. That's why not everybody makes it or can take the next step to open up a business. So I think that's sound advice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right. So Michael, I know you very well at this point after working with you for a while. I mean, as well as you can, right? Being in a virtual environment. But what I noticed about you is you care very deeply about who you work with, how you work with them. You always come present. You're always very engaged. Everybody says that about you. So I have a feeling you have a purpose as well. And so I'm curious, what's the impact you hope to make on the small business community?
Wow, yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for the kind words there, I appreciate that. One of the things that I'll answer it kind of from two perspectives. First one is I have gotten pretty clear on the companies that I like to work with, or the organizations that I like to work with, and I think that's where we can be most successful. So again, we've had a long relationship. I've worked with your team for a long time. Well, why has it worked so well? Well, first of all, you folks are really good at what you do. You're really passionate about what you do, and you don't take yourself too seriously. And that third one, I think, is absolutely crucial. And so I think that one of the impacts that I want to have, or the major impact that I want to have with small businesses, is kind of that, to say, hey, work hard, be passionate about it, and don't take yourself too seriously, and let that drive your sales culture. And so when I work with organizations like yours, like others that I have, and over time we look at, we get to a point where the culture is strong, right? And we always say, you take a great person, put them in the wrong culture, culture wins every time. It's the opposite is true. You create that great culture, and that raises your people up. And when we get to that point where, honestly, Marla, there'll be a day where you come to me and say, we got it. And I'll be like, cool, excellent.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Awesome.
Yeah, so now let's just celebrate the wins, right?
Great.
And so that is the impact that I want to have. It's creating that culture, and then being able to celebrate that. And again, I'll say it a third time, the ability not to take yourself so seriously, I think is just so much fun. Absolutely fun.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Well, so the other thing I would ask you, and we'll end with this, is if there's one piece of advice that you could impart on our audience, what would that be? What do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, it's one of my top sayings, and I came up with it when I was 20 years old, when I was going through a rough time, and I told myself, if the sun can get up, so can I. And at the time, I lived in Phoenix, and the sun was always up, so I just always got up. And so now it is still one of those things that's in the back of my head. If the sun can get up, so can I. And what I mean by that is, doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It matters what you do today And it's like, if you go golfing and you get in that sand trap, don't fret that you're in the sand trap, focus on your next shot. So that would be my advice.
I love it. And how do they get in touch with you? Tell our audience how they can get in touch with you to learn more.
Yeah, so website, it's a little long of an address. It's salesleadershipdevelopment.com. So you can find us there. Also, Colleen Stanley is the founder and principal of the organization. So you can Google Colleen Stanley or Emotional Intelligence for Sales Leadership, which is her latest book. And you can find us that way. And then you've got my name, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I am open for connection.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Michael. This has been wonderful.
It's been great for me too. I appreciate the time.
All right. Okay, so we're going to introduce ourselves again.
Go.
Hi, and welcome to Raincatcher's podcast. I'm Marla DiCarlo.
And I'm Susan Frew. Welcome.
And we have Michael Kuehn with us here today. I'm so happy to have you join us, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, listen, I want to start with giving a brief introduction about who you are so our audience knows about your background. So Michael Kuehn, he's the Vice President of Sales with Sales Leadership. Michael brings nearly 2 decades of sales and leadership development and expert facilitation skills to sales leadership. He has led sales teams in a variety of industries: healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, hospitality, information technology, and financial services. Michael has delivered hundreds of interactive workshops and keynote presentations to groups as large as 5,000. In Michael's downtime, he is usually training for his next event with his wife and son and rooting tirelessly for the Denver Broncos.
Yay!
Go Broncos.
Go
This is their year.
Broncos.
This is their year. I say it every year.
Okay.
Well, we're so happy to have you as one of our guests. And our company's been working with you and your team for a while now, and we just have seen so much improvement, and we have learned so much so that Michael is our main preferred sales training group that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was thinking about when I was thinking of you, Michael, I've never heard the story of how you got started in sales.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So yeah, let me jump in here. So right out of college, I got my first sales job. It was an inside sales job with a phone, smiling and dialing, 80 calls a day for a small project management training and consulting firm. Did that. I was about a year into that, and I was kind of struggling. And the CEO pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, Michael, you're a really good kid, but I don't know if you're cut out for this." And I said, "Well, thanks for the compliment. And I don't know if I'm cut out for this either, but can I ask a favor?" And I asked him, I said, can I try a different approach? Can I do something a little different? And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" And so the sales process that I was taught when I went into that company was, you make as many phone calls as you can, and we're putting people into classes. And so it's just smiling and dialing, pushing, "I've got the perfect solution for you, by the way, what's your problem?" And my approach that I wanted to try was, rather than do that, as opposed to pushing a public workshop schedule, what I started doing was just calling organizations, talking to CIOs, head of training departments, directors of IT, whoever I could talk to, and would have a conversation with them about where they were at as a department or an organization, where they wanted to be, what was stopping them from getting them there. And then if my training workshops could help get them there, then I would present that as part of a solution. And so what I found is, after just 2-3 weeks of this, started getting some great success. And I realized it was very difficult to sell a $500 seat to a workshop, but I could sell $50,000 worth of training, $100,000 worth of training, if it was tied to a business need, right? If it was tied to that business need. And so the CEO sat me down 30 days later and said, "Hey, Michael, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." And so I did. And then a year or two later, he sat me down again and said, Michael, we now want you to take over the sales team, create a sales culture, a repeatable process. And I was absolutely thrilled and absolutely terrified because I had no idea what I was doing. But I did know that I could benefit from outside counsel. So I went out and found a mentor, Colleen Stanley, and I worked with her to create that sales process, to create that sales culture. And then she worked with me from an emotional intelligence standpoint on how to be an effective sales leader. We took that company, it was a little $800,000 a year company. We built it to about a $10 million a year company. We was there for about 9 years. Quickly then went into the federal government space doing leadership development work, worked with the CIA, the FBI, the EPA. Sounds a lot more impressive than it was. And if you've had any interaction with federal government, you may understand why I left that after about 18 months. And then from there, manufacturing, healthcare, a number of different things. But that was where I got my start. That's where I got the battle scars.
And
That's awesome.
that's how you met Colleen. I love the story.
That's how I met Colleen. Yep.
That's wonderful.
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, you bet.